Hugo, 2011, a movie that takes place in a beautiful city of Paris. This film is based on the book The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick. This movie got 11 nominations from the Academy Awards, or known as the Oscars. The film won 5 out of 11 wins in that award. Directed by Martin Scorsese, and the screenplay of the movie is written by John Logan. The film stars Asa Butterfield as Hugo Cabret and other actors and actresses such as Chloe Grace Moretz as Isabel and Ben Kingsley as George Méliès. The story takes place in the 1930s about a young boy named Hugo, an orphan who lived most of his life alone at the train station fixing the station's clock. Fate has led him to an old man named George, who owns an old-fashioned shop on the station selling toys and conducting mechanical repairs with the help of his 12-year-old goddaughter, Isabel. Hugo is getting closer with George after being accused of theft and having his prize-catching book taken. He is subsequently aided in retrieving the book by Isabel. Hugo finds a way to retrieve his father's notes while learning the truth about the automation that he found with his father as the plot unfolds. After the stealing event occurred, Hugo was offered by George a job at his shop to earn his trust and to retrieve his book. Several days after that, at the Film Academy Library, Hugo and Isabel find a book about the history of cinema that was Méliès' contribution. They meet the book author, René Tabart, a film expert who is surprised to hear that Méliès is still alive, as he disappeared after World War I, along with the copies of his films. Excited at the chance to meet Méliès again, René agrees to meet Isabel and Hugo at George's home to show his copy of Trip to the Moon. Finding the heart-shaped key on the station railway tracks, Hugo drops down to the tracks to retrieve it and is run over by an out-of-control train that smashes through the station. He wakes up from this nightmares, but he hears an ominous ticking emanating from himself and discovers that he has been turned into an automation. Hugo wakes up from this nightmare. It was just a nightmare for him. At the home, his George's wife, Jean, follows them after René recognizes her as Jean d'Alexis, an actress of many Méliès films. They play the film, waking George, who is finally convinced to cherish his accomplishments rather than regret his loss of dreams. George recounts that as a stage musician, he was fascinated by motion pictures and used to film to create imaginative works through his Star Film Company. Forced into bankruptcy after the war, he closed his studio and sold his films. He laments that even an automation he built and donated to a museum was lost. Hugo realizes that it is the one he has repaired with his father. Hugo races to the station to retrieve the automation, but he is caught by Gustave, who has learned about Claude's death. Gustave threatens to take Hugo to the orphanage. Hugo runs away and manages to evade Gustave by hiding the outer face of the clock tower, precariously balancing hundreds of feet above the ground after climbing back down. Hugo races to escape the station but drops the automation on the tracks. He jumps to retrieve it and almost run over by a train, but Gustave saves him and the automation. George arrives and tells Gustave, "These boys belong to me." Sometimes later, George finds his name as a professor to a film academy and paid tribute to a showcase of his film recovered by René. Hugo and his new family celebrate at the apartment, and Isabel begins to write down Hugo's own story. From the synopsis of the film above and the story of the film above, we could infer that the internal conflict or the premise of the film is about past trauma, about past memories. We could see this from The automation that Hugo retrieved with his father, it turns out it was made by George. We could say that the automation holds a key to the past of both of this character. As for Hugo, it is a memory with his father. As for George, it is a trauma. It is a memory about the things that he made back then that he could not even finish. So, if we're going to analyze the narrative point of view, we will analyze the scheme of the film. By theory of A.J. Graham's the actential theory. So first we have the subject. The subject is the actor who agrees with the sender and assumes that he must obtain the object. So in this film, Hugo acts as the subject. Hugo, a boy who has a great desire to uncover the secret of the automation that left by his father. This can be seen in the movie throughout the movie, which shows Hugo's attempt to steal missing the tool parts of the automation until Papa George catches him. The object. An object is something the sender wants that is not present. In Hugo's film, the acting as the object is the secret of the automation that Hugo's father finds out and tries to fix. Hugo was obsessed with getting clues and knowing about the automation because he thought this thing is the key to his father's past or is related to his father. And then we have the sender, is the actor who moved the story or by which a story in a narrative structure can be composed. In Hugo's films, the actor who acts the sender is Papa George, because he was the creator of the automation itself, which later tells Hugo about his past. Besides Hugo's ambitious and strong desire are also the actors who play the roles of the sender in the films. This is because the ambition continues to encourage Hugo to reveal the secret behind the automations. And then we have the receiver, is the actor who received the object. In the film, the actor who acts the receiver is Hugo. It's because the desire to get the object that is the secret behind the automation he is trying to fix. Therefore, he spends so much time collecting the missing parts of the automation one by one so that he could fix the automation again. And then we have the helper. This who helps the subject carry out his duties. In Hugo's, the actor who acts the helper is Isabel, a girl who helps Hugo in many ways to get the object. For example, when Hugo's notes were about to be burned, the station inspector suspects them. Professor Tebert is willing to help to persuade Papa George and Mama Jean by replaying an old film. Mama Jean tried to help Hugo hide when Papa George was at home and permitted Professor Tebert to show an old film by Papa George. Besides, Papa George is also helpful because in the end, he is the one who told the secrets of his past, the secret of automation to Hugo. And then we have the opponent, an actor who hinders the subject's task to get the object. In the film, the actor who acts the opponent is Papa George at first because he took Hugo's notes, which contains the secrets about the automation, the fix on how to fix the automation, and kept a secret what he knew about the automation. And then we have the station inspector because he made Hugo steps in, because he stops Hugo's in many ways towards his adventure, towards his journey on fixing the automation. Hugo feared that the station inspector because he feared of being locked up and being transported to a faraway place, like the other orphans that are always walked in the station, always in the station. From the we can identify that the acting schemes. It can be seen that a character can be hold several attention roles. For example, it can happen in the story that the helper also could be your opponent, and also other characters can fill one actential role. For example, the role of a helper can be filled by several characters. An actential role can sometimes be filled not by human character but by something inanimate or something as abstract as Hugo's ambition to fill the role of the sender. I think that we can conclude that the homologies of the terms homologies from the actential theory by AJ Grimes to this film is mostly about trauma, past trauma, about passion, about ambition, about fears. I think those are like the most essential terms and part of the film that builds the foundation of the film, that builds the narrative storyways of the film. So if we all connect all of the analysis from the homologies and the scheme analysis from the one that I explained before, we can identify the occurring message or that is being showed and discussed implicitly in this movie is about past trauma. The automation is the key to the movie. It has a purpose. Turns out the automation is made by George when he was still in his golden year of his career. So it's a fragment of his memories when he was still working as a movie director. But also, it serves as a bad memory because it reminds me of its past, of how his studio went on bankruptcy. So it serves as a trauma. It could trigger him to a trauma. As for Hugo, he thinks it's this automation, it relates to his father, so he would do anything to fix it that it might give him hints about his father. So we could infer that that trauma could actually, like from George's point of view, that we could see in this plot analysis that the trauma that he have, it stopped that his purpose of life, that he didn't think that directing movies is not part of his life anymore, that he thinks that it's not important. He felt that is no purpose of doing it again, so he lost his purpose and doing not something that he would do regularly, like fixing the like a repair shop, build a repair shop and having a toy shop. Like that is not what he wants to do. What he wants to do is to make film, but he has this inside of his unconsciously, he has trauma inside of him. But Hugo, he has a purpose. He thinks that the purpose of his life, his whole life is about fixing the automation because it's the only thing, it's the only key that it relates to his father. So he found the purpose, and turns out the purpose was it was the key of this purpose. To find the key of the purpose is George himself. So he would do anything to find to fix George's past, to relieve his past, to to face the trauma that that George faced, that George went through to from his golden days of making movies. So we can infer that in this movie we see that it's about purpose and trauma, and how we have to face our past trauma to move forward, even though how it hurts, even though how it can be it could be hard for us to move forward. We have to move forward because the clock is still ticking, like the time is still going. We could see this from Hugo, both Hugo and George. Like George stops his career because he has trauma. He couldn't face the trauma that he dealt throughout his career. Also for Hugo, he felt that he doesn't have any purpose, only fixing clocks, until he found the automation, that he felt that this is a message from his dad that he has to move forward. And also, like for George, even though he has trauma, he has to move forward and do what the thing that he loves, and that is making movie. Making movie is his purpose, and that makes him happy. That's all from me from today's plot analysis of Hugo's film, the 2011 Oscar-winning film. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you.